Good evening, directors, staff, and members of the public. I will now call this March 29th, 2022 special business meeting to order. As noted in the notice, the purpose of today's meeting is only allowable topics, and they are to approve modifications to the 2021-2022 school year and school day, to authorize implementation of memorandum of agreement terms with the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers and Educational Support Professionals, and to approve purchasing, service, and construction contracts and other routine time-sensitive items. Will the clerk please call the roll for the record?
Director Arneson?
Here.
Director El-Amin?
Here.
Director Ali?
Here.
Director Sorillo?
Here.
Director Inns is here. Director Jourdain?
Here.
Director Caprini?
Present.
Director Pauly? Oh, sorry. Director Ellison?
Here.
Student Representative Wesson?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Director Arneson, will you please move approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. The agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. That motion carries, and we have an approved agenda. Our next item is to approve the resolution labeled as 2022-20, making modifications to the 2021-2022 school year and school day length, and authorizing implementation of memorandum of agreement terms as negotiated with the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers and Educational Support Professionals. This resolution, the terms of which were ratified by MFT membership, ensures that students have access to missed instructional time and that statutory instructional minimums are met. Noting that Superintendent Graff and staff are available for any questions, I will ask Director Arneson to move approval of this item.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Approval of the resolution has been moved and seconded. Directors, are there any questions? Director Jourdain?
Yeah, I had a question. What is the cost for this to cover the extra 3 weeks in terms of missing the past 3 weeks? I know when we're talking about schools with no air conditioning, and we have our K-5 kids in buildings, et cetera, you know, utilities, et cetera, as well as our cost of our staff, which is of course different than right now. I mean, right now we're, you know, still running our furnaces, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is the cost offset? Is it negligible? I don't, you know, I'm just kind of curious how that works out with it being summer, et cetera. And transportation costs especially, but I'll just leave it at that.
So Director Jourdain, thank you for your question. I do not have Senior Officer G up here this evening to respond specifically to those costs, but as a district, you know, every day we're in operation, it's several millions of dollars to operate, and so if I'm understanding your question, you're asking for how much does it cost us on a daily basis to operate school?
Yeah, what is the difference between operating that late into the school year, into the summertime? I should have been a little bit more clear than it is right now. Obviously, like I just said, it's a little bit different utility cost-wise, et cetera, transportation.
Yeah, I don't know that I can answer that. I mean, different variables, as you mentioned, depending on the weather, depending on, you know, the actual number of routes that they would be running, you know, may change depending on the time of year.
And then also, too, a follow-up, too, for families in general. Do we have to meet a certain threshold for attendance for our students? I know that there are quite a few number of students, you know, whether it's camp, whether it's summer of service. Well, there's many church groups where youth, as soon as school is out, they're up north. You know, back home on the reservation, we have churches that come from the metro area, some in Minneapolis that do work on the reservation. As soon as summer school is over, they're up there. I mean, so are we holding students back? We have students that are doing Legion baseball. We're having students doing summertime dance line, et cetera, et cetera. But we also have parents that have, you know, arrangements. And I'm specifically talking about custodial arrangements, visitations. I talked to two parents on Saturday, one a mom and a dad. One was a dad, one was a mom, The mom lives out of state, and so her custodial agreement, she has her children in the summertime. Now she has to wait until the 24th to be able to spend whatever summertime she has left with her children, through no fault of her own. The dad lives in northern Minnesota, same difference, you know. And so we're asking them to sacrifice time with their children. And yeah, I get it, they do, the mom did say that she does see her children over Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, we are infringing on some parental rights when it comes to custodial visitation agreements through the summertime. And I find that personally disturbing, that parents are having, especially parents in that situation. I know they're not the only two parents in the district that have to face that situation. And I can't imagine how infuriating that has to be. I personally would be absolutely livid. And I appreciate the civility of the two parents I talked to, who are both very, very upset that it came to this. But I'm just kind of curious, how are we going to move forward with our students in school, and especially our seniors. You know, a lot of our seniors, you know, they've had commencement like on the 8th or 9th, and what are we going to have them do till the 24th? You know, we have our K-5 students who do need that social emotional learning process of being in the classroom. I mean, there's just no real easy answer out of all of this. I mean, there really isn't. You know, I've been a proponent of social emotional learning with our students, going back to pushing for 30 minutes of recess. I mean, these are components that our children do need. And I don't know what the easy answer is. I mean, do we excuse some of our older students and still have school for our K-5 students or our students with IEPs? I mean, the social developments. And each situation is unique. I mean, it doesn't matter, you know, how we remedy the situation. It just doesn't seem like it's just not going to satisfy everybody, is basically what I'm saying. And it's very hard, and I do apologize to the students and staff. My kids aren't very happy about it either, and I'm not happy about it either. You know, as a parent of a child at Washburn and Page, this hasn't been easy on anybody. You know, my kids aren't happy about going to school in June, for as long as that is. And do we have a uniformed 42-minute policy? Because I'm not sure if we do. I got a robocall today from Page that said, we're sending out a survey, and we're going to figure out how we're going to divvy up that 42 minutes. So we don't even have a set plan. So are we leaving up to that? Are we leaving that up to individual sites to figure out how they disperse that 42 minutes? Because the robocall I got from Page today sure sounds like it. And I think I've rambled on enough. So, thank you.
Yeah, so Director Jordan, thank you for your comments. I think you know, the sentiments you shared in terms of frustration are probably equal around the city right now in terms of where we are with things. So a couple of things just to note. The first thing is that what we are here to vote on tonight is part of the return to work agreement that was authorized by the MFT, ESP, and the Minneapolis Public Schools School District. So those things have been agreed upon and mutually signed off on. So for us to make decisions outside of that context would require, I guess, a whole change in ratification of the vote. That was necessary to provide that to the employees so that they understood what the contract would look like in their vote. That being said, I can have staff, you know, kind of speak to that process a little bit. Interim Senior Officer Bennett can share just a little bit about that process. I can also just note that the idea of having to make up days is a requirement, a statute requirement, and I know I've referenced this repeatedly over the course of the last 2 months, that this is a statute requirement for us to follow and adhere to. There's information that I'm sure is publicly accessible for people to see that the statute requirement does have penalties, criminal penalties, if it's not followed, to individuals, board members, superintendents, educators. And then there's also the requirement to have a certain number of days and minutes. And so those are things that were discussed in the process of agreeing to a return to work understanding. And so those are all things that have been determined through the negotiations process. So if I could have Senior Officer Bennett maybe just speak to that process and what we've gone through and what that looks like. And then I think in terms of the requirements around days, Senior Officer Fearing, if you could kind of address that portion of it, and then we'll see if there's any more follow-up questions.
Sure, thank you, Superintendent Graff. Good evening, board members. So I'll just go ahead and say what the statute reads, and I know that people have been doing the math and trying to parse things apart, but I think the most important piece when we were having discussions with the Minnesota Department of Education is that it is our obligation, if not duty, to provide a free and appropriate education to our students, and we must follow the statute guidance of our state, of our Department of Education. We do know that there are going to be extenuating circumstances, not just for students, but with staff, but those are the things that we're going to have to work with individually in order to come to a conclusion, because we know that extending far into the end of June will be disruptive and interruptive to a lot of our families. So we will have to take those cases on unique basis and work with our families on that, like we would do at normally any end of the year when we'd have some families with unique circumstances. So the statute reads, you need to have both days and instructional hours. And so the days are 165 days minimum. So many school districts, if not all, have more than those days put into their calendar. They don't really stop at the 165 on their calendar because they know they'd be below statute if they had to release for at least one day. So in our calendar, we have 170 days. And then, of course, we had the 5 days approved for e-learning if there was inclement weather, which is important to get so that it did not subtract from the 170 if we were to have that inclement weather piece. And that piece was approved back in August by you, the board. So we have 165 days. This is for grades 1 through 11 that's required. And then we have also instructional hours that are required. And the purpose for this is to make sure that we don't have schools that would say, oh, we're going to go for 150 days, but 10 hours a day, right? You need a balance of both days and instructional hours. You don't want it too short of a school year with long hours, or the opposite, where you're going all year with 2 hours of school per day. So the requirements for kindergarten without disability is 425 hours a year, 935 hours for grades 1 through 6. So you can see how it gets a little unique because we have our elementary grades K through 5, and then our 6th grade is with middle school. So it does get a little challenging there. And then we also have 1,020 hours of instruction for grades 7 through 12. And I think it's important to notice that this includes 12th graders. So they are under the statute of instructional hours as well, even though the days specify grades 1 through 11. Is that okay? Good?
And what specific questions, Superintendent, did you want me to answer as it related to the return to work process?
I think just the process. Obviously, there's negotiation process that I don't think a lot of people realize when you are in the space of operating through a strike, what has to happen. So I think just the technical aspects of what that timeline looks like from the time we have a tentative agreement to the next steps and ratification and board vote.
Certainly. So once we concluded with the TA between the ESP unit and the MFT teacher chapter, it was imperative for us to talk through the modified work conditions, which included the requirement to make up those student contact days and to discuss how we would transition in both employees and students back to school and to the work environment. And so part of the agreement with the MFT was sitting down at the table, having the conversation about how we would modify, can you hear me? Sorry, how we would modify the work conditions which would support getting them back to school to support students. And so that was about a 9-hour process. It was a full-on sort of intense negotiations process, which both parties did agree to a variety of conditions to support the return to work on Monday and then work with students on Tuesday. And that was in addition to the TA that was ratified, needed to be approved by both the ESP chapter and the MFT teacher chapter in order for us to move forward. So that is sort of in a nutshell what the process looked like as it related to the modified terms and conditions for returning after the strike. Is that helpful?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this clarification, but I want to take it back like if I didn't understand. Because, I mean, first of all, we don't have interpreters in here, and I feel that we're not being mindful in communicating with our diverse communities that don't speak English. That's number one. So just to clarify, so what are the requirements from MDE, Minnesota Department of Education, about how many days and hours MPS needs to make up because of the strike? Because I'm hearing from a lot of community members, including a lot of students, that don't understand this, and perhaps we have not done a very good job communicating this because we're still grieving throughout this process of everything that we have gone through. Because I had students saying that I work after school, so what am I supposed to do? How is that gonna affect also the bus drivers? So I want to just take me step by step because our community is still very, very confused. And if there's also some wiggle room, and if we don't comply with the mandate of the state, what is gonna happen to us? I just feel that we have reached a point where our community needs to also understand where we are. Thank you.
So again, Dr. Fearing, would you mind kind of walking through the technical aspects of the statute requirements? I don't know if it'd be helpful to even reference the statute number that, again, is the equivalent to state law and what our district has to comply with.
Sure, thank you for the question. And I know that our communications department is working on putting something out there that actually shows the numbers and the hours and the mathematical piece to how we calculated extending the school year to June 24th for students and 27th for staff. I would say that one of the things to think about when we're talking about the amount of days that we're out, like I said, it's days and hours, and so we had to think of a way of doing both because we kind of crossed that threshold where we just couldn't keep adding more days or we'd be going into July. We couldn't just add more hours to every day and be out June 10th because you'd be going to school till like 8 o'clock at night. So we had to think of a way of doing what was manageable for both, and so we didn't want to propose going any later than 45 minutes per day. I mean, just knowing our late start schools, knowing when students would be taking the bus and getting home. Our original thought was thinking about 30 minutes, but then, you know, as the days out of school progressed, we had to keep lengthening those times. Otherwise, we would have to add more days in after June 24th. So it's kind of the massaging of both the hours and the days. We wanted to stay above board, but we didn't want to be adding more days than absolutely necessary. We really did not want to go past that last week of June just because of a lot of the summer programming, step up, jobs. I mean, a lot of those things, it was starting to get very interruptive after the 10th of June, but then going into another week and then another week really was becoming more challenging. So what we can do is we can make sure that we have the communication from our department that really lays out what the hours and kind of, it shows kind of the gradation of how the hours and the minutes for each grade band, elementary, middle, and high school be made up. The one other thing to remember is for our middle schools especially, they were very close on instructional hours at June 10th. And so as soon as they were out of school for about 2 days, they were already under their hours, even before they were under the days. And so those were things that we had to take into consideration too, is that we, because our schools have different lengths of instructional days, some moved faster than others in terms of how much time they were going to have to make up. So I think that's a further conversation when we look at the instructional minutes that are across the district at different schools. But for right now, we had to take, you know, here's kind of the common medium and you know, everyone needs to make up days now. Now everybody needs to make up hours, and we had just had to keep moving forward until we had the return to school and return to work decision.
Thank you. Then going back to the bus driver, so we're going to be providing families transportation. That is something that we are very clear on, that we will be providing all the support and transportation and all the needs that our families will be requesting. That's not going to interfere at all with the bus drivers. Do we know that for a fact?
Thank you for the question. So as a result of the modified calendar and extension to the workday and the work year, Director Surreal, we do have to enter into similar agreements with other bargaining groups where the calendar has to be modified for them as well to support students, and we are in the process of doing that as we speak. So to answer your question, we will be covering routes, and I'm not sure if Karen's here or not to help support on the transportation side, but we have been in conversation with that union group and the union leads, and they are on board with supporting any type of a modified agreement to support students getting to and from school on the modified days, and specifically this coming Friday.
So what if we don't comply with the state? I mean, I just, you know, don't want to like pretend that I'm stupid in here. I just want to be sure that we do mention that to the community. What will happen if we do not comply with the state?
So I'm going to see if we can have General Counsel Moore provide some response to this. So if I could ask General Counsel Moore to perhaps provide an explanation regarding statute.
Absolutely. Directors, if we do not comply with the mandated requirement in the statute, there are fiscal ramifications that can happen, as well as criminal, which the superintendent referenced earlier. And, you know, it would be, they're looking at a willful noncompliance, which at this stage it would be, and that those criminal penalties can be applied to administration, but also to other staff. Teachers are referenced in that statute as well. So you're looking at both financial reduction of aid that we have from the state, possible financial penalties, as well as criminal penalties.
No.
Thank you. Director El-Amin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I do too. I have several questions again, and I'm just going to try to speak from the concerns that I've gotten from my community, both educators and students as well. The one being the 42 minutes that we're talking about tacking on to the schools. Both North and Henry had already extended days throughout the school year. So I'm just wondering if that is going to be something that's going to be taken into consideration with the different schools, so that again, schools can identify what their needs are. Because again, once again, this is something that's affecting community. And I just feel like we should be trying to hear and listen to all the concerns that are being brought before us before we take a vote or make a decision. I don't know that we've done enough to even go back to MD and ask if there is a different course that we can take and see what the response. I know what the state mandate is, but I also know we've been under some extreme circumstances. And right now we're in a situation where things are not the normal way. And so I would rather for us to go and ask that if we have not, and see what the response to that would be. But those schools like North and Henry that already go to 3:30, that would be pushing them back to after 4. Is that for students? Is that for all staff that's in the building? Is that the social workers and everybody that will be taking on this extra burden that we're putting? I guess those are some of the things that I'm hearing from my community, and just really want to make sure that we are taking the time to hear from our community and ask every question, even if it's a no. We have to ask and we have to make sure that we're doing our diligence to see what can we do best for the families that we serve.
Thank you, Director El-Amin. Senior Officer Bennett, if I could have you again speak to the return to work agreement and what that agreement means in terms of options at this point. And then General Counsel Moore, I know you were part of a discussion regarding the statute requirement. If I could have you speak to what that conversation was like with the different representatives from the department or communication from the Minnesota Department of Education also.
Absolutely. Directors, the question was posed several times, well, more than several times, and in different ways about what are other options, both from the union side as well as from our side as well. And consistently, the department made it clear that they would not entertain any discussion where students were not receiving their statutory rights to the minimum number of hours and days. So the questions were posed many, many times in different ways, and the answer was consistent that it was no. There was no option to not make up the hours and days as required by the statute.
And then I guess my follow-up would be about staff. Is that all the staff that would be in the building? Is that still our counselors that would remain in the school building? Is that still the Davis Center here that will remain open during those hours? Are we making sure that everyone is being impacted by this change that's going to take place?
Director El-Amin, yes, to your question, counselors are part of the MFT bargaining group, so yes, they would be affected as our social workers, psychologists, nurses. They're all covered within that same collective bargaining agreement. But to the point I made earlier, we are currently having conversations with the other bargaining groups because they do have a defined work year, and so we do have to agree with them, like we did with MFT, to extend the work day and the work year with those groups as well for those affected individuals. And that would include, like for instance, security monitors, front office staff, transportation, food service. And so we are currently in conversation with them about what the extension of the work day and the school year looks like for them in their respective areas of work.
So it seems like it's kind of backwards to me, and I don't know if we're on a time constraint to decide about this 42 minutes being added to the calendar, but for me to vote and put a vote out there, I would want to know that all parties are going to be a part of this and not that it's selected, which is what I'm hearing. So for me, it's kind of, again, I think we have some work to do to ensure that this change is going to impact everyone because everyone was a part of this. And so we should be making sure that all these different agreements or contract, whoever it is we need to talk to, I personally feel like that should be done first before we take a vote towards moving the calendar.
Thank you. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge, the tough position this board is in, and how there's not a lot of room to move here. But with that being said, I did just have a question. How much flexibility does this allow, really? Like I saw here on the proposal that distance learning, like asynchronous learning, I believe on like June 16th, 17th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th shall be authorized to have a digital learning option. So like, basically my question is like, how much flexibility can a school give to their students? Because I know that this is going to have a lot of impacts on, different impacts on high school students, middle school students, and elementary school students. So what can schools do to better accommodate individual needs for each student?
Student Representative Wesson, thank you for your question and your perspective, specifically as a student. What I will ask members of the team to do is to speak to the return to work agreement. That is really the document that we are operating from. That was, again, mutually agreed upon with MFT, ESP, and the district. And so that is the basis for all of the decisions around what needs to happen with the calendar, the working conditions, the adjusted time. So the resolution that the board is looking at tonight encompasses that, but does not have the level of specificity that the return to work agreement does. So if I could have perhaps Senior Officer Bennett kind of share some of those highlights, and just know that it is a line-by-line document that has very detailed kind of expectations that we have to adhere to as part of the tentative agreement, and actually the ratified agreement that was just done this weekend by MFT and ESP bargaining groups.
Thank you, Superintendent. So the return to work agreement between the both chapters of the MFT, which includes the teachers and the ESP, had to be mutually agreed to in order for them to return from the work stoppage, which was the strike. And so because they are the instructional leaders in the classroom, it is imperative for us to be in agreement as it relates to their collective bargaining agreement. So what that means is they have a collective bargaining agreement which covers their work, but when you go out on a strike, then and you need to return, you have to both discuss with the party, that particular party, and seek agreement with that party on what returning to work looks like. And you get to sort of renegotiate what the terms and conditions of the work environment are. And so hence the return to work agreement, which we outlined specifically the missed student duty, or excuse me, the missed student instructional days, as Senior Officer Fearing discussed. So they did agree to extending the work day and modifying the school year such that would support continued student learning, which didn't happen during the time we were on strike, as well as a number of other factors, which include bonuses and days to transition, supports that principals would give as they're transitioning back to the classroom. So that's really sort of the impetus of the return to work agreement. It is an MOA, and it does have to be mutually agreed to by the two individual parties, the district's representative as well as the union's representative.
Perfect, thank you.
Director Inns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks for that question, Student Representative Wesson. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about how things are going to play out, certainly with respect to the extra 2 weeks of school and the extra time. However, you know, I definitely hear a lot of that and feel a lot of that uncertainty, and people are anxious about that and what that's going to look like, and we can't necessarily know how it's going to play out everywhere. I hear from my neighbors too. I know people have summer activities that are starting during the school year, right? And how they're going to go ahead and deal with that. Or we talk about sometimes like snow days, and you know, families have to make individual choices sometimes. But you know, the statute and the law is pretty clear that we have to provide a certain amount of school days and a certain amount of learning time to students. That's, you know, a really simple basic function that we have as a school district. And you know, I'm all for following that law. I think it's a good thing that we have a law that says we have to provide a certain amount of education to our students. So in any event, you know, I think certainly we have to follow this law, and it's been bargained for how we would return, how we would implement this to the best of our ability that we can foresee right now, right, with our unions, with our ESPs, who I'm sure many of whom want to return to work, right, and want extra work days, want to make up for the work days that they missed, right, are excited to get back with our kids in the time that they missed. And there are plenty of kids that do want to go to school and do want to learn, and plenty of families that do want opportunities provided for their kids for their missed time. So we have an agreement that we've bargained for with the union. Presumably, if we were to somehow like undo that, I mean, what happens then? We go back to the bargaining table and come up with a new one that we then present before the board to vote on at some time in the future, not tonight. Is that, I guess, what happens if we undo it? I mean, I don't know, but certainly every school is different, every community is different, but we have to provide a certain amount of time and a certain amount of days for our children to learn. That's the basic function of this school district, right? And for us to turn away from an agreement that has been reached between our unions and the district because we have uncertainty about what the future looks like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I support this agreement. I support the work that has been done by the leadership of the two unions and by our negotiating staff to put it together. I can imagine it wasn't very easy to do that. And as I think about what the future looks like in those last 2 weeks, I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know what it looks like for my family. I don't know what it looks like for individual families, but I'm glad that we're going to provide opportunities for kids to at least slightly make up for some of the time that they've missed in school over the last few weeks. So I support this agreement, and I will be voting yes on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Inns. Director Caprini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. So there's a lot of room for learning for students in this moment, actually from over the last 3 weeks. You know, the right to build capacity, the right to organize, the right to strike, right? I think there's a lot of great lessons that have come out of all of this. I think, and I believe, I personally would be failing my advocacy for education if I didn't follow the law and vote yes to this contract. I don't want children to walk away from this and think that there are no consequences to the choices that you make. And it doesn't mean that they may have made a poor choice in supporting and striking. That doesn't mean that at all. What that means is that you absolutely, no. No, personally, I'm not punishing anyone. What I'm doing is following the law. And I'm actually in a position where I'm going to lose time with my daughter. I'm going to lose time with my daughter because she leaves for college. I didn't graduate from college. And I'm not here to try to make anyone feel sorry for me. I want you to understand something. We each are losing something in this moment. We're losing something. All of us are. There isn't one person who's going to gain everything. We have students that are short in credits that desperately want to graduate. We owe them that. We owe them that. Enough. We owe them the opportunity to finish high school. The thought that we would actually be having a conversation about not following the law, the statute, is ridiculous. And I would like to believe that the other bargaining units that have to be in a conversation about what it is that they are willing to do in order to extend this school year are not going to fall to the wayside. They too care about their students. They do. People cared enough about their students to fight for something more. Then we all care for the students enough to be able to have to walk through this together because there's no other option. A lot of work went into getting to this place. A lot of people have been harmed over the last 3 weeks. I'm going to lose time with my daughter who is leaving for college. That's my problem, right? I'm one of thousands of parents who are going to have to make a sacrifice. And we've made plenty of sacrifices on the north side, plenty of sacrifices. I refuse to make a sacrifice for someone's education just so that I can have the extra 3 weeks with my daughter. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Caprini. Director Ali?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I call into the question.
Thank you. To vote. We have to vote on that because we have no one else in queue.
No.
Okay.
Vote on it. It's not debatable.
So call the question.
It's not debatable.
I'm sorry.
It's not debatable.
It's not debatable. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay.
Nay.
That motion carries. So discussion stops. Director Arneson renews her motion to approve this resolution. All those in favor say aye. We're voting on the resolution. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries.
You have to do the collect.
We're going to take a recess until we can get the. So. I'll call a recess, yes.
No.
Let's do a 5-minute recess until we can get the room quiet.
They need to be fired! We're sick!
I'm going to bring this meeting back to order.
They need to be fired! We're sick and tired! They need to be fired! Woo-hoo!
Director Arneson renews her motion to approve this resolution. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. We'll do roll call. Director Enns?
Are you going to pay our bills?
Director Enns?
Are you going to come to our internships? Are you going to support me so I can get to my HBCU? Are you going to support us? Where's the support? It's not in this room. It's not in this room. Yeah. It's in a classroom with my teachers. It's not here. Don't ignore the students. Come on now. Yeah. We matter. Our voice matters, and you're eradicating it, and that is not fair. It is not fair to anyone here.
You can say, okay, like we're done. We're not done. You're eradicating our voices, and it's not right because this is affecting us. This is not affecting you.
You can keep saying thank you, and we are not thankful. You have done nothing here to help us, and it's not fair, and it's not right. You're going to sit there, and you're going to try and vote yes, and no one here wants that. This entire room does not want that.
That's just that. Is anybody in here who wants this extension in these days?
No. You have students, you have parents, and you have teachers. These are the people that are here are going to be affected. No, none of you will be affected. You don't have to think about if you're going to have to pay your bills when you get home. We do.
You don't have to worry about paying rent. You don't have to worry about working 9 to 5 and
your kids who go in this school district, your kids who go in this district, are they being affected by this like we are? Are they not affected? Your daughter.
I can't hear you.
Think of your daughter. Think of that. Think of her.
I am.
Think of us.
I am.
Think of us. I really don't think you are.
Hello.
Tell me what I'm not thinking.
Hello.
Don't tell us what we want.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I have say a few words, please? You are 4 of you are here, right? You are the leaders, right? What about if we give you each one of you 3 minutes and we listen to you, and you go to that podium and then talk to us and we listen to you, and then we have also work to do here. People of City of Minneapolis elected us to do a work, and this is we have an agenda to follow. So are you trying to cancel our meeting here and then we go home without working for the people? Let us listen to you, 3 of you. We will listen each one of you 3 minutes. Let's talk, have conversation, hear you, okay, and then we move forward.
Director Ali, is it?
Yes.
You guys are being performative, telling us to go to this podium podium when you just said you already made up your mind.
No, I just made this deal with you on behalf of my fellow board members because we need to move forward, right? So we want to hear from you, okay, and listen to you. All of us are here. And after we listen to you, we thank you, and then we do our work.
If y'all haven't listened to us this whole time, what's going to make you listen to us right there? If you haven't been listening to us through this entire time.
Now we listen to you.
Hey, does a microphone help you listen? Does a microphone help you listen? Because we've been talking, right? Should we get this turned on? Is that maybe going to help listen? Because here's the thing, we've been trying to speak.
What's your goal here? What's your goal here? Do you want to have, you want us to go home and just cancel? Are you thinking of canceling the meeting here? Is that your goal?
We want you guys to wait. We want you guys to vote no.
We already voted for that, and we voted yes. We already voted for it. Maybe you were not here. We did. Are you sure? No.
No, I don't think we voted. We voted on. I did not.
Nelson, you are the clerk.
I don't remember that.
Some people are saying we have not voted for it. What do you mean, Tom?
We didn't do a roll call, but.
We could do a roll call.
Let's do the roll call now, again, for the sake of clarity.
All right, Director Inns? Director Inns, can you do a roll call?
Excuse me.
Just a minute.
Back in session now?
Yeah, we're back in session.
Okay, back in session.
I already did.
Why would you not table the vote until the whole community is here?
So, Director Armisen?
Yes. It's unacceptable for anybody. Why would you table it?
Director El-Amin?
I'm not voting without the superintendent
We're
here.
begging you.
Okay, so you're abstaining?
I'm not
Okay.
voting without the superintendent.
Director
here.
Ali?
I don't think that we should exist.
Okay. Director Cerrillo?
I vote no.
Director Inns, yes.
So this is so disrespectful.
Director Jordan.
I'm so sorry, but somebody has to bring common sense to this. This is not a meeting. No, we cannot even. Like, can we
Director Jordan.
present an amendment, a motion?
Yeah, the
to,
superintendent, our
no,
leader
the superintendent,
needs to
exactly.
be here
Thank
before you
you.
touch the
This is
vote.
so
That's just
disrespectful.
totally not
No,
acceptable.
absolutely
That's not
not.
acceptable.
Absolutely not.
Chair, that's not acceptable. You said we voted on that. That's totally not acceptable.
I vote no.
That's not acceptable.
It is sick.
And if the superintendent is not going to
This
come
is
to the
absolutely
vote, this
sick.
is going to be challenged. This is not acceptable.
Yes.
My God, how much
Yes.
longer do we have to
You should
play
be
this
ashamed
game?
too. This is
Play this
unacceptable.
game. My God.
Okay, all right. That motion carries, and the resolution modifying the,
Yes, we can.
yeah, we can.
Actually, we can. I mean, our leader is the one, where's our leader? Right there. No, our leader is the superintendent. Our chair doesn't even know what's going on. She said we voted out.
Yeah.
This is totally unacceptable.
That motion carries. Our final item is approval of the consent agenda. Approval of the consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Having concluded the business of our agenda without objection, I will now adjourn this meeting.